Hey guys, SGT here, and we're going to jump right in with Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. Thanks for joining us, number one. And number two, I want to talk specifically today with you about what's happening in Greece, because on Sunday we saw riots, we saw the beginnings of a revolution, and as Greg Palast pointed out in IMF documents, which people can Google, and I'll tell them how to do that right now. Google this, IMF Confidential, the secret documents the masters of the universe would rather you not see. We know this is all planned, and it's all by design. And I'm fit to be tied about it, Bob, because this world is in dire need of a revolution against these banksters.
Well, first of all, if you remember a number of times on this program, I said, I don't know exactly what Germany's up to. They're saying on one hand, well, Greece can go do this, that, and the other thing. And this was over the last 3 months. With that said, obviously, they have a plan to dump Greece. And I think it's as simple as that, and it was promulgated and created and put together a long time ago. This has been another song and dance by the bankers, and they think they're going to get away with it, and they're not.
Let me ask you, when you say that they're not going to get away with it, let's talk about the possibility of an absolute, overt revolution in Greece and a revolution here in this country, because as we now know, globalization kills countries and even major cities. Look at Detroit. I mean, they're turning off streetlights in Detroit because they can't afford to keep them on, and police response times for even violent crimes is in the hours now. So what they're going to do to Greece is try to force these people to live in absolute serfdom and absolute poverty. And, when people start starving, they get really angry. And when their children start starving, here's the thing. Do these puppet masters, let's talk about the Rothschilds, let's talk about the Queen of England, let's talk about the real puppet masters, Queen Beatrix. Do they not worry for their own personal safety, the George Soroses of the world? I mean, Nat Rothschild lost a libel action suit against the Daily Mail recently because the Daily Mail referred to him as a puppet master in Russia, and he tried to sue them, trying to say that that's not true. He has nothing to do with what went on in Russia with the oligarchs and everything else, and he lost his case because everybody now knows that the Rothschilds are puppet masters. Don't these people fear for their personal safety when they drive people into this kind of enslavement and people get this angry about it?
Well, they have from time to time, but not like they do today because of the Internet and talk radio and, programs like this going out all over the world. And, some of us have a large following throughout the world, I being one of them. And when we discuss this thing, these people, listen, let me tell you something. I lived in Europe for a long time. Every European knows that the banks and the Rothschilds run Europe. And they finance both sides of every war, et cetera, et cetera. They know that. But they've never been able to speak out against it. And this is their opportunity to do so. In fact, you're even seeing it in the election in France right now. And so, are they afraid? They certainly are. We're coming after them this time. No more Mr. Nice Guy. The seat of power, the key to what they're doing is banking, finance, transnational conglomerates, and we got to take them away from them. And once you've done that, you've emasculated them financially. The next step is you take them to court and you try them for all of these crimes they've committed, and we'll call them civil and criminal crimes, depending upon what they are. Remove all of their wealth from them and their families, and the wealth be given to the state of each country in which they live, followed up by criminal trials for people who have committed treason. I mean, I was writing about the Rothschilds funding the oligarchs in Russia 15 years ago. Nobody wanted to listen. Every one of them were funded by the Rothschilds.
And Putin kicked them out.
And he was right.
Damn straight he was right. And
where did they go?
To Israel, I believe.
2 of them went to London. All the rest of them went to Israel.
Mm-hmm. Look, here's the bottom line. What went on Sunday in Greece, the only reason that government didn't start to fall on Sunday was because it put in place 5,000 police officers to try to defend Parliament and everything else from the people. Now, as Stuart Rhodes and other patriots have pointed out, if in this country we can get the military to stand with the people and stand up for the Constitution and the oath they took to defend it, we're in damn good shape. And the same will be true in Greece when those police decide not to stand and protect the puppet masters that want to enslave them and kill their children, and instead stand with the people. This whole paper empire falls overnight.
Well, everybody's missed a point. Even though the police are defending against public property, private property, they are with the people. They are already with the people. The military has already said they are with the people. There's not going to be any kind of violent revolution where the public attacks the police and the military. I mean, us throwing petrol bombs and stones and stuff like that, it's dangerous, yes, but it's child's play. Nobody's opening up with weapons. And Greece is not going to have a violent revolution unless these morons in Europe send troops in. Then they'll have one, and they might have Greeks from all over the world returning to Greece to wipe them out. No, there's not going to be that kind of a problem. Let the Germans do what they want to do. Let the Greeks get out of the Eurozone, and the EU if they choose to, which I don't think they would at this time. And let them go into default. And let the banks in New York that wrote the CDS, credit default swaps, for $70 billion, let them eat it. Now, they don't have the money to eat it because they're all broke. So let the Fed print the $70 billion, lend it to the banks to give to the other banks over in Europe that bought the CDS. That's the way that's going to turn out. I get this thing all figured out.
Well, and I think the people are starting to figure it out, too, because like I said, when your children start to go hungry, that's when you move to action. I mean, you want to talk about crossing the Rubicon. This government passed on New Year's Eve the NDAA, which makes every single one of us essentially terrorists in the eyes of the government that could be snatched in the middle of the night, black-bagged, and put into a military dungeon indefinitely. Okay, so now everybody in this country who hasn't been listening to what we've been saying for years now, Bob, in your case, decades, even everybody on that side of the fence is starting to wake up and say, hey, something's very wrong here. Do you know the only person speaking out against that who's running for president is Ron Paul? I mean, I know you know that.
That's right.
And that's why Ron Paul has such overwhelming support. And if they'd stop stealing the straw polls from him, and if they'd stop stealing the primaries, and if they'd stop fixing the vote, and if the GOP wasn't so corrupt, Ron Paul would be the next president of this country.
And they're going to have a revolution because of it, and it will happen here. And it will be very short-lived because I talk to people in the military of all rank, and they all say the same thing. We are not going to do that. And that's an unlawful order. And if the government doesn't like it, we will occupy the White House.
Let me jump in.
You're going to see a coup in America. There will be some bloodshed, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as bad as people think it's going to be. And I'm not being Pollyannish. Our military and our police forces are not a bunch of thugs. There are people within those organizations that shouldn't be there, just like there's attorneys and doctors and so on that shouldn't be doing their jobs either. Well, but with that said, don't forget that thin blue line doesn't last very long when you're outnumbered about 1,000 to 1.
Well, check this out. I think that you're right, and I didn't necessarily believe that the military was on our side as recently as 6 months or a year ago. But there's some quantifiable things we can look at, okay? And one of those quantifiable things is that 70% of the military support of active military is going to Ron Paul. As we all know, he's getting more contributions than all the GOP candidates and the president, the current sitting president, Barack Hussein Obama, a.k.a. Barry Soetoro, combined. So what we know is that folks in the military who have the courage to stand up for the Constitution, and they know that their name is going to be on a list when they contribute to Ron Paul, but they're courageously doing it anyway and sending a message to the establishment that we support a constitutional government. And that is our greatest hope, is that this military is awake. And for every one person in the military who believes in that and is sending money to Ron Paul, I'm sure there's 100 others that don't have the guts to send him a check but still support him. So that's the hope. And if this establishment can't see that, if they can't wake up, Bob, it's hard to imagine what their end game plan is because, you look at globalists like Bill Gates. who's now one of the top shareholders in Monsanto, who's poisoning the world, and and he's building seed vaults all over the and seed vaults in the Antarctic, and these people are maniacal, and how can they not see that the writing is on the wall?
Well, I think they do, and they never expected it because they always got away with it. They had another war, and they will try another war too. But this Iranian thing is not turning out too well for them, at least from a propaganda viewpoint. They stepped in 2 holes and shot themselves in both feet. But getting back to the military, one of the reasons, and I'm a veteran, is I've continued to stay on through the most difficult times at the beginning with the Marine disquisition, was that we're reaching servicemen and women of all branches all over the world every week by the millions. And other militaries listen as well. And now what's happening, and has been happening, incidentally, that's the #1 program in Blog Talk and has been for 8 years. They're listening. And I found out through the State Department, of all places, that my publication is picked up immediately upon its being published. Everybody on the Beltway who wants it, every consulate and embassy in the world belonging to the United States government has it, and everybody who's interested reads it. So I qualify probably as the most plagiarized publication in the world. But it's important that people understand. I spent a long time telling the people the truth like we are in this program here in the military. And that's one of the reasons they know why.
All right, well, I want to follow up with you, Bob, on one important thing. So Adam Kokesh, Bob, is holding a march on the White House with veterans this coming Monday the 20th. And Adam Kokesh used to be a corporal, I believe, in the Marines, and he is one of the most outspoken people with one of the best platforms, aside from you or Alex Jones or Max Kaiser, that we have on our side. So I just want to say this for anybody who is anywhere near the Washington, D.C. area who wants to support that march, who is either a veteran of the military armed forces or is not a veteran. You are welcome to be there too. Please support that march on the White House because our voices will be heard. Before this thing becomes violent, our voices will be heard, and we will take this thing back with the help of Ron Paul, with the help of Patriots, with the help of Stuart Rhodes, with the help of people who stand up for truth and honor, with the help of people like Bob Chapman offshore, writing the International Forecaster. We are going to take this damn thing back because these people want to kill our children. And you know what? That's the line in the sand for every thinking, caring human being, is when they start to victimize children, like they're doing in Greece, and those children can't get access to food. It's one thing to watch adults suffer, but to watch their kids suffer, that's when people take up arms, and we're not going to let it get to that point here.
And then getting very little, if no, medical care. I publish, it'll go out tomorrow, how the budget's been cut at the hospitals in Greece, and if they don't have the proper drugs or anesthesia, people die.
I don't think there's many people that would be listening to this that don't know exactly what we're talking about. I don't think there's too many people left that would be listening to this, that would say, well, this is just wild-eyed conspiracy theory, this is just the banks. So what powers do the banks have? And even if they had all this power, why would they want to crash entire countries? Well, it's to consolidate their power. It's so that they can be the last ruling monopoly left on the planet, and they can rule over us with an iron fist. But we're not going to let that happen. But here's my question. What do you think drives these people? We've talked about it before. I know what I think to be true, but people like Nat Rothschild, the people with the George Soroses of the world that report to the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers of the world, they already have more money that could be spent in 1,000 lifetimes. So what drives them to be so evil, to hurt people and to starve children, to have these endless wars where people come home in body bags or come home, incapacitated or brain damaged? What drives these monsters, Bob?
Power and insanity. They want total power, just like they had in ancient Egypt, and it's the same gang of people. The names change. Some of the names change through the centuries, but and the same thing happened in Rome, and of course a lot of them get wiped out, and we saw it in 1348 with the collapse of the Lombard system and the distribution of these bad people throughout Europe, mainly to Amsterdam and Wales. People don't know these stories. They don't know anything about history. It's such a tragedy that they can't listen and know all about it and say, yeah, that's what happened. Well, it's what it did happen. And early in the 17th century in Europe, they had the collapse of the Hanseatic League. Same thing happened to a lesser degree. And since then, they've run roughshod over everybody. And it's all based on fractional banking, control of the financial centers, control of the banking system. It's the key. We take it away from them. And each country runs its own and does what it does, for monetary and fiscal matters within governments. People can do what they have to do. They can follow their own path as sovereign nations. We don't need the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and people like them telling us what to do.